dear beloved Compassionate Ocean Sangha. A very happy 30th day of May to each of you. It's wonderful to be sitting together again and to have an opportunity to continue on with our series of teachings on the Book of Eights. It seems like a little while since we've delved into these rich and beautiful texts. So I'm really delighted to be coming back to this root text again with you this evening. Recently, somebody sent me a message and said, Brother Pháp, hi, your talks on the Book of Eights are pretty good, but it seems to take you a long time to get to the point, to get to the actual text. And actually, this is absolutely true. I do tend to wander down side streets and enjoy looking at various unexpected sights along the way. But at the same time, I do have my destination in mind. Sometimes we can speak about something without even mentioning it. So often we're conditioned to wait for the big reveal. But the big reveal, it seems to me, is in each and every moment. The most important aspects of our lives might be the ones that we most overlook. Our deepest spiritual practice might be the way that we lift our teacup, our coffee cup, and not the way that we sit on or how long we sit on our meditation cushion. In fact, this is one of the key topics I want to speak about this evening. In Zen, body, heart, mind, and the environment all around us are interconnected. The Chinese character for mind can either be translated as heart or mind, depending on the context. It's important to be aware of how our modern society has led us to favor mind over heart and the implications that that has for our approach to meditation practice and to our everyday lives. Do we intellectualize the Dharma or our spiritual path instead of embodying it wholeheartedly, for example? In meditation practice, in mindfulness practice, we engage with each action, even the most ordinary. In fact, especially the most ordinary. Going to the toilet, opening the door, cutting a piece of tofu, as the most important moment of our life, with all of our being. We recognize the ways in which we may have been divided, and we come back to being fully united. Day has reminded us so many times, when we walk, we just walk. When sweeping, just sweep. Mind, heart, body, and the environment are in sync in those moments. Our ego, our sense of self, often thinks that it's better than the task of sweeping. And in that way, there's a separation between body and mind, the broom, the dust, every other living being, and what we think our spiritual life is. Each of us has ingrained, and in some cases deeply ingrained, habit energies with everything we do. And one of the capacities that mindfulness helps us to cultivate is the capacity to recognize these. When we see something for what it is, change becomes possible. Without this capacity of slowing down, of recognizing, then transformation is challenging. Our entrenchments become deeper and deeper. I've said it before, but I feel like I want to say it again. And if this is the last thing I ever say, then I feel like it's an important thing. That is, thinking will not give rise to embodied wisdom. Thinking does not give rise to embodied wisdom. In his instructions to the cook, which we mentioned in our last talk, the Zen teacher Dogen shares that someone on the Bodhisattva path, the path of service, should cultivate and develop three minds. The big mind, in Vietnamese, Dai Tâm, the parental mind, in Vietnamese, Lao Tâm, and joyful mind, in Vietnamese, it's Hi Tâm. Big mind, or sometimes it's translated as magnanimous or equanimous mind, means, according to the Zen master, being unprejudiced and refusing to take sides. He says, when carrying something that weighs an ounce, don't think of it as light. And likewise, when you have to carry 50 pounds, don't think of it as heavy. Some of us, at this moment in time, we might be carrying more than 50 pounds. So let's not think of that as heavy. Don't get carried away by the sounds of spring, nor become heavy-hearted on seeing the colors of autumn. View the changes of the seasons as a whole. Weigh the relativeness of light and heavy from a broad perspective. I've shared about this in terms of micro and macro attention, developing the capacity to zoom out. In other words, magnanimous mind is not swayed by our biases and preferences. This is one approach to recognizing our constant selfing, as we've been exploring in earlier talks. Cooks with magnanimous mind work with the ingredients that they have, not the ones that they wish they had. Practitioners with this mind also work with the ingredients that they have in their mind and heart, and not the ones that they wish they had. Because the ingredients of your mind and heart are the ingredients from which, in fact, the only possible place that you'll be able to cultivate insight and compassion. It might not feel like it. Many times it might not feel like it. But what's there is always enough. More than enough. Even if, or perhaps especially if, it looks worthless. Anxiety, fear, depression, anger, loneliness. These are very important ingredients if we know how to use them in our spiritual life, if we know how to take care of them. Not just ingredients such as joy, happiness, and peace. Using the ingredients we have also means that we recognize the kinds of dishes we can create and offer with the ingredients we have at hand, and also those that might not be possible at this moment. With big mind, we offer what we can wholeheartedly, and we don't regret not being able to offer things. For example, here in Mountain Spring, we do have very limited facilities and very limited monastics at this time. These conditions inform and they shape our offering. If different causes and conditions were there, then a different offering becomes possible. But rather than thinking that only if we can make a different offering, it's going to be worthwhile, or that different offering will be better, we're doing our best to practice wholeheartedly to offer the different dishes that are possible with the ingredients that we have at this moment in time. Let's enjoy a sound of the bell. The Chinese character for great or big is a pictogram of somebody with their arms stretched out wide, embracing all, not just the things that they like or agree with. To embrace everything doesn't mean that we don't have an opinion. It means that we're practicing to look for root causes and to not exclude anyone or anything from our heart. For many of us, the mention of a hot political issue that we don't agree with, or a short conversation with a difficult person, is enough to damage this quality of big mind. Our generosity of spirit shatters straight away, and we want to separate ourselves from that person, narrowing the circle of all beings to everyone except that guy or that group, whoever that group or that guy might be in any situation. The real essence of this quality of big mind is to understand that this big mind, big heart, includes everyone, even those we can't stand, even the parts of ourselves that we might not at this time be able to stand. What a paradox. I myself cannot stand the taste and smell of seaweed. It doesn't mean that I don't love it and I don't appreciate its presence in the world, nor do I think that I need to eliminate seaweed in order for this world to be more beautiful. It's an ingredient that might not be something that brings me joy, but it has its place in the world and in the lives of others. Maybe in my life as well, from a distance. What does it mean to have big mind when we are looking at issues like racism, discrimination, or abuse? With big mind or big heart, we are, as our teacher Tay reminds us, a person who's calm on the rocking boat in a storm. The calm person can look deeply into causes and conditions and takes action or speaks out when words or actions are needed. Sometimes we need to take action. And the calm person also knows when not to take action. If you're a cook, you'll know that some ingredients in the kitchen, in your pantry, are bitter, or they're astringent, or spicy. Some are sweet. With big mind, big heart, we know how to make use of the ingredients that we have in our hearts and in our hands, and we balance all of these ingredients in order to make a meal. The second mind that Dogen speaks about is called parental mind or nurturing mind. In Vietnamese, it's lao tâm, which literally means old mind. Old mind here doesn't mean jaded or tired. That can be tempting, but rather it has the quality of taking care, of nurturing, of looking over in a natural way. Just as Tay reminds us that the right hand can take care of the left hand without thought, as a natural response. Dogen wrote, when you handle water, rice, or anything else, you need to have the affectionate and caring concern of a parent raising a child. With this heart mind, we take care of all beings. Notice that I'm saying all beings instead of all things. And there's a reason I'm doing that. That is because we often treat things in our life as if they're objects. We think of beings such as people or animals and so on, but everything else is just an object. So with this parental mind, this old mind, we realize that we're in relationship with everything. We don't treat anything like an object. We treat it and relate to it as a being that's supporting us in some way. So he says we handle water, rice, or anything else with the affectionate and caring concern of a parent raising a child, taking care of all beings as though they're our children, from a grain of rice to the people we cook for, from our shoes to our own bodies. I wonder why we treat so many things in our lives like objects. There's one young novice in Deer Park Monastery, where I was living for a considerable period of time, who after sitting meditation often places both of his hands on the cushion. One day I asked him why he was doing that, and he shared that he wanted to express his gratitude to the cushion for helping him in his meditation. So this is the mind that's referred to in this text when Dogen invites cooks to handle ingredients as if they are their own eyes. And he continues on to share that a parent, irrespective of poverty or difficult circumstances, loves and raises a child with care. How deep is love like this? Only a parent can understand it. A parent protects the children from the cold and shades them from the hot sun, with no concern for their own personal welfare. Only a person in whom this mind has arisen can understand it, and only one in whom this attitude has become second nature can fully realize it. So how do we nurture and manifest the old parental or nurturing mind? This is the mind of seeing our responsibility for and how we nurture ourselves and others, what we're nurturing in them, and seeing that we're not separate from situations. Is it possible for us to consider even those who've committed what we might consider to be something abhorrent, completely different to our way of thinking or acting, as our children who have lacked perhaps the appropriate guidance and opportunity that might have steered them down a more wholesome path or direction? Is it possible to reflect on the fact that maybe we haven't been very good parents to other living beings after all? Is it possible to reflect on the role that we've also played in contributing to the violence in the world, and consider how we can change our way of acting and interacting to improve the situation in the present and in the future? If we understand interconnection, we realize that we are also intimately connected with all of these situations. So this mind of nurturing mind or old mind or elder's mind is not about having it all sorted out. I think it's about wholeheartedly giving it a go. I recently asked my aunt when she felt grown up and had it all figured out. She shared with me at the age of 71 that she hasn't yet reached that day. The same heart-mind doesn't spoil or neglect ourselves or others. We create that balance within and all around, seeing what we need to nurture and what we are nurturing within ourselves, and what we need to nurture and what we are nurturing in others. The third mind is joyful mind, hitam. It's recognizing how very fortunate we are. It's the capacity to reframe our experience, whatever work we're doing, for example, rather than feeling hard done by and thinking only when I finish this work will I be able to do something meaningful. Can we engage with it as a path of service, of opening our heart? This mind of joy arises from our aspiration to be of benefit for ourselves and others, and it doesn't depend on things going right. And it doesn't fade away when things inevitably go wrong. This is the mind that arises when we recognize, as Tay reminds us, that all the conditions of happiness that we have in our lives at this very moment. This is the mind of gratitude for what is. The cook, for example, sees the opportunity to feed and to serve others not only as a job, but as an opportunity. And Dogen says of this mind, joyful mind, a joyful spirit is one of gratefulness and buoyancy. I think that's a quality that as practitioners we could use a little more of sometimes. Buoyancy, lightness, joy. How fortunate we are to have been born a human. This joyfulness is rooted in the understanding that we already have more than enough of what we need to be happy. When we are not cultivating this mind, this joyful mind, this capacity of recognizing the conditions of happiness we have, we begin to want more and more and begin to operate from a position of lack. In Instructions for the Cook, Dogen explores gratitude as an expression of joy. He points out that even if we lived in a heavenly realm, we mightn't even think of practicing, because conditions would be so perfect, we wouldn't feel any inspiration to practice. If we lived in hell, in a hell realm, then practice might be too difficult. So with this mind, this joyful mind, we have this sense of gratitude for exactly where we are, and we treat each meal, whether it's a meal that we're cooking or eating, or it's a meal in a metaphorical sense of a situation, as Dogen puts it, as an opportunity to feed the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha within ourselves and in others. So joyful heart mind is a contentment that happens not only after we've washed all the dishes and we've swept the floor and done all of our errands, but as a central part, an integrated part of each activity. So let's enjoy a sound of the bell. After all of that perhaps pointless preamble, let's have a look at this week's poem. This week's poem is number 14 in the Book of Eights, and after this poem we have another two poems to explore together. This poem is called The Quick Way, or the Discourse on Being Quick. Now, if you've ever been to Plum Village or to any of our Dharma centers, you'll know that we aim to not be quick. We aim to slow down. Slow down our bodies, first of all, and then slow down our minds to be able to dwell fully with everything that we're doing. I remember on one trip to China, we were staying in Gaomen Temple, and one day one of the monks came to see us, to see some members of our delegation, and asked if we wanted to see the herbalist. I asked why, and he said that the monks in Gaomen Temple were concerned that we might be sick because we were walking so slowly. Quick here in the context of this poem, of this discourse, is a recognition that the path is not a linear one, but reveals itself in each and every moment. It's not a path to somewhere, but it's a path that reveals itself in each and every moment. So in that way, it's quick. And in this poem, you'll notice that there's a quite different tone to previous poems in the Book of Eights. Here we see a much more deferential tone towards the Buddha than in previous poems. And also, rather than describing a wise person or the practice of letting go of views in great detail, this poem is primarily addressed to monastics and shares how they should train. The term monastic in Vietnamese can be translated as one who has left home. And I think this is a helpful approach for us, since though many of us listening to this talk might have a physical house, the essence of left home person means one who is looking deeply to see where they're entrenched in body and mind, and always being willing to let go and to move forward. This is a quality that anyone, regardless of ordination status, can cultivate. In that way, I would hope that each of us would see this poem as applicable to each one of us. So the Tuvutaka Sutta, the quick way, the questioner says, I asked the kinsman of the sun, the great seeker, about seclusion and the state of peace. Seeing what is a bhikkhu, a fully ordained monk, quenched, not grasping at anything in the world. In this first stanza, we see a questioner approaching the Buddha and addressing him with very respectful language. Again, we haven't seen this up to now in the Book of Eights. Seclusion in this stanza, of course, means physical seclusion, but more importantly, refers to not being carried away by sense impressions. Many of us over the past year have had the experience of physical seclusion. Prior to that, it was the dream of some of us to have physical seclusion. We'd read these words and think, oh, if only I could go to the forest, or to be alone, or to just be in a hut by myself or in a room by myself, my mind will instantly be calm. So would you raise your hand if that has happened for you over this past year, since many of you have had the experience of being physically secluded? Right. So actually, seclusion here is not just referring to the physical environment. That's only a superficial thing. We can be in a very quiet environment but still be incredibly occupied in our mind. So seclusion here is referring to not being carried away by sense impressions, not being pulled this way and that. Even if we're in a room by ourselves, we can still be pulled here and there, sights and sounds, smells and thoughts and so on. Whenever I hear this word seclusion, I think of the discourse on the better way to live alone, to not pursue the past, to not lose yourself in the future, to not be swept away by the present. This is the highest form of seclusion, and it doesn't have much at all to do with whether we're in the forest or in the marketplace. In the first stanza, we also hear the phrase, the state of peace. State of peace here refers not just to a feeling of peace and ease and things, but to nirvana, to liberation. Liberation from all concepts and notions. And in this stanza, we have that beautiful word quenched. And I find that to be very helpful, and it's a beautiful track back to what is recorded as the Buddha's first discourse, the fire discourse, sharing that everything's on fire. Our eyes are on fire, our ears are on fire, our tongue's on fire, and so on. So here, when we read that word quenched, there's this sense of all the fires going out, not grasping at anything in the world. So the question is basically, I'd like to ask you about not being carried away, and about nirvana, about liberation. Seeing what is a practitioner quenched? What is it that a practitioner sees that puts out this fire of craving in them and leads them to not grasp at anything in the world? And the Buddha responds, one should completely extract the root of conceptual differentiation. That is the notion, I am the thinker. One should train, ever mindful, to dispel whatever craving there is inside. So this stanza has a very important teaching which we've touched on before. That is that the Buddha reminds us that the root of suffering is our tendency towards selfing whenever a contact arises, or forming a rigid set of distinctions. And the poem continues, whatever principle they've discovered for themselves or heard from others, they would not be stubborn or entrenched about that, for good people say that this is not release. So here's a reminder that insight continues to blossom, to flower and to grow, and that we need to be aware of turning insight into an object that we grasp onto. What principles do we identify with or hold dear in our life? How many of them have come from our own insights and realizations? And how many of them have come from the realizations and insights of others? One characteristic of insight is that it is freeing. So the poem continues, you shouldn't on that account being having insight, having gained some kind of insight, think that you're better or worse or even equal. Touched by contact in various ways, we shouldn't keep conjuring a self. So in each and every moment, our sense bases are interacting with contacts, a sound, a smell, a taste, a touch, a thought, a sensation. Along with these contacts usually arises a shade of feeling, pleasant, painful, or neutral, or mixed. As a shade of feeling arises, if it is pleasant, we tend to want more of it. If it's unpleasant, we tend to want less of it. This, in simple terms, is what's meant by grasping. We cling onto something, And then we begin to solidify a sense of self around it. I am this feeling, this thought, this view, and so on. When we think of grasping, we often think of the things that we grasp onto, but rejecting is equally a form of grasping because we're actually grasping onto something else. So when we consider grasping and we notice this tendency within our own life, within our own experience, I invite you to focus not only on the things that you hold onto, whether they're ideas or possessions or other people, but also notice the things that you push away. Because that can be as powerful an insight, the things that we push away, the things that we reject, to help us to understand what we actually are clinging onto. The poem continues, totally calm within themselves, a bhikkhu, a practitioner, would not seek peace from another. For one who is at peace with themselves, there's nothing to embrace, still less to reject. Totally calm. This means not pulled out of themselves or ourselves here and there. Not seeking peace from outside. I think that is a really important teaching for all of us to look and see how, as we discover in the Discourse of the 8 Realizations of Great Beings, our mind has this tendency to always be searching outside of itself. We have this tendency, as our great teacher, Master Rinzai, Master Linchi, reminds us, of running around here and there, looking for something that we think we lack, that we've had all along. And this, as we discovered in an earlier series of talks, is one of the basic teachings of one of the most important sutras in the Mahayana tradition, the Lotus Sutra. That which we've been searching for is our birthright. We've had it all along. Our issue is that we're not willing to admit that to ourselves. We're not willing to acknowledge that, or we're not ready to acknowledge that to ourselves. And then with this mind, with this embodied insight, there's nothing to embrace or reject. It means that we become aware on subtle levels of the self that we create with every contact that we have. And because when we create a self, we have this rigid position in any moment, then we're embracing, we're rejecting. The poem continues, as in the middle of the ocean, there are no waves, but all is still. So they would be still and unmoving. A bhikkhu, a practitioner, does not swell himself or herself up with conceit at all. A particularly important word in this stanza is conceit. Being puffed up with conceit is the phrase. And the sense in this poem is becoming aware of how we spoke earlier about selfing with every contact that occurs. But here there's the sense of the conceit that arises, and the conceit here is referring to self-conceit, how we create positions in every contact. So basically, one simple way to approach this is to reflect on how in most situations we tend to see ourselves as greater, less than, or equal. And the questioner in the poem continues, you've taught me, O one with eyes open, seeing principles for yourself and dispelling dangers. Venerable Sir, tell me the practice, the rules of conduct, and also meditation. So the question is basically sharing, you're teaching me from your experience, sharing things that you've seen for yourself and helping me to see the dangers. Would you please share with me about concrete practice, the rules of conduct, and also meditation? And the Buddha shares, not letting their eyes wander, turning their ear from crass conversations, not greedy for flavors, and not thinking of anything in the world as mine. What exactly is crass conversation, you ask? I'm happy to tell you. It's one of my favorite lists in the Pali Canon. I have whiled away many an hour reading through this list. It brings me a lot of joy, and I love it when there's an opportunity to share about this list. So these are the things that the Buddha has shared with us are considered to be crass conversation topics. Conversations about kings, about thieves and politicians, armies, alarms and disturbances and battles, food and drink, clothing, furniture, jewelry, scents, relatives, vehicles, villages, towns, cities, the countryside, men, women, and heroes, the gossip of the street, the gossip of the well, the tales of the dead, this and that, the creation of the world and the sea, talk of whether things exist or don't exist. I love to spend time with this list because it's basically almost everything that we talk about. These are almost all of our conversational topics. They fit into these realms most of the time. Small talk to build rapport is wonderful and it's necessary, but it's important to be aware what root it comes from. As a great teacher once said, if we can't control our mouth, there's no way we can hope to control our mind. When touched by contact, a bhikkhu would not complain at all. They would neither long for any states of becoming, nor tremble at dangers. They would not store up goods that they get, whether food or drink, other edibles or cloth, and they would not be afraid of not getting anything. Sometimes we think of simplifying our lives and having a simple life and not having a lot of possessions, and this is a very worthy thing. This is a wonderful thing. But just like going to an empty room doesn't necessarily bring about that sense of real seclusion that we spoke of earlier, I've come to feel that simplifying our life, while it's a wonderful thing to let go of our possessions and things, doesn't just have to do with the outer things. It has to do with our attitude of mind. It doesn't matter if we have 3 shirts or we have 1 shirt. We can have 1 shirt and be clinging onto that as tightly as possible, almost ripping that fabric into shreds. Or you might have 3 shirts and be completely free about the whole situation. I, a couple of years ago, had a great opportunity when I was in Oregon. I was having a retreat and I was by myself. And I didn't have the support of the Sangha around, and I had the opportunity of just living simply. And I thought, how are my requisites going to be provided? I didn't have very many funds and things during that time. And then I understood, I remembered that the Buddha said if we practice sincerely, and then our needs will be supplied. And you know what? It just always happened. Just sort of was okay during that whole period. And for me, it led into a very beautiful practice, a practice that I enjoyed to this day. And that's a practice of doing my best not to ask for anything. I don't do it in a passive-aggressive way. If somebody comes up and says, is there something that you need, I will respond. But I noticed that prior to this experience, it was a very subtle thing. It wasn't overt, but I noticed that I was kind of having this sense of wishing that I had this or wishing that I had that, and I always felt that I was lacking something. So I decided to reframe my approach to this, and I decided to recognize what I already had, and to just allow, if something kind of came into my life, and to receive that, and then if somebody else needed it, to offer it on. And it's been a very beautiful practice of openness, of recognizing all the wonderful conditions that we already have, and to see like I don't actually need that thing, and the things that I actually need are very few, and the things that I actually need tend to show up. And so I've really enjoyed that practice. It's been a very deep one for me, and it's watered such a sense of gratitude. I don't recommend it for everyone, but for me, in my situation, it's been a very helpful practice. The poem continues, practicing jhana, the deep absorption of meditation, not footloose, not remorseful nor negligent. The bhikkhu, the practitioner, would stay in quiet places for meditation. Not footloose, which I love as a translation, can also mean not loitering around. So not running around everywhere without any focus, but also not loitering around. And I like this because we can think of it physically, as someone who's loitering around or someone who's just running around everywhere, but also in terms of our attention on a deeper level, of not sitting down to our meditation or engaging with our practice without any kind of intentionality, but then also not being so heavy and stagnant that we don't allow it to be a flowing and natural experience. So not loitering around, keep on going. Staying in quiet places in the context of this stanza, of course, means to be ideally in a quiet place, but more importantly, to not be overly busy in our body and mind. The poem continues, they would not sleep much, but be ardent. And the original word for ardent in Pali means to be on fire, developing wakefulness, mindfulness. And they would abandon laziness, deceit, jokes, games, together with other frivolities. I remember when I first was practicing meditation in Sri Lanka, one of my biggest fears was waking up at 3 a.m. We went to bed very late and we woke up at 3 a.m. in the morning, and our day consisted of waking up and then sit, walk, breakfast, sit, walk, lunch, and then the same in the afternoon. That was basically our day. But my biggest fear was not sitting for 8 hours or whatever it was a day, but my biggest fear was getting up at 3 a.m. I had been taught all of my life, you need a solid 8 hours of sleep. And so it was a really big fear for me. It seemed so harsh, but I actually did notice that as I practiced meditation, I needed less sleep. I think I've told the story of when I was visiting our root temple for the first time back in 2002 with a delegation. Then it was my dream to be able to sleep in the root temple. It was very difficult at that time to, because of the situation, to be able to sleep in our root temple, in the temple that our teacher was a novice and trained. So, but one night I had the chance, and I was so happy. It was one of the happiest moments of my monastic life to sleep in our root temple, our home. And I was laying on the bed box and I slept very well. And then I woke up with the sound of the temple bell early in the morning. I sat up and I was ready to go. I was putting on my robe and everything, ready to go for the morning chanting. And then the other monk in the room kept telling me making indication I should lie down. And he said like this, go back to bed, go back to bed, go back to bed. I didn't speak much Vietnamese back then. And so I couldn't understand why he was telling me to go back to bed. And I kept saying, no, I'm going to the chanting. And he said, go back to bed, go back to bed. So I sat on the bed and I didn't know what was going on, but he went out of the door and then suddenly the temple bell stopped. And it turns out that the young novice whose job it was to invite the temple bell had invited the temple bell at a little bit past 2 in the morning. So we were actually up quite early. But here in this poem, in addition to physical sleep, we're being reminded to devote ourselves to mindfulness, to what is translated in this verse, wakefulness. And then the poem continues on, a bhikkhu would not be anxious when criticized, nor puffed up when praised, but would thrust aside selfishness, greed, divisive speech, and anger. A while back we spoke about the 8 winds or worldly dharmas that we can be swept away by. Praise and blame, gain and loss, and so on. These are what's being referred to here. They would not engage in buying and selling, nor revile anyone anywhere. They would not linger in a village, nor cajole people hoping to get stuff. A bhikkhu would not be boastful, nor speak with an ulterior motive. They would not train in insolence, nor say things that were argumentative. Isn't that a great line? They would not train in insolence. They would not be carried away by lies, nor deliberately betray anyone. Nor would they look down on anyone for their way of life, intelligence, virtue, or vows. Even if provoked by different sayings of contemplatives or ordinary people, they would not answer harshly, for those who retaliate are not calm. This is calm with a capital C, not just the feeling of calm, but calm in the sense of quenched, of freed, of being liberated. Fully understanding this principle, an inquiring bhikkhu, an inquiring practitioner, would always train mindfully, knowing that release is peace. They would not be negligent in Gautama's teaching. They overcome. They are not overcome. Seeing the Dharma directly with their own eyes, not by hearsay. Therefore, they would always respectfully train in accordance with that, diligent in the teaching of the Buddha. So seeing the Dharma directly with their own eyes and not by hearsay, this is the aim of the practice, for each of us to be able to see the Dharma directly with our own eyes, to see the reality of the Dharma with our own eyes, and not just from what other people have told us in talks such as this one, or in books or so on. Such an important line, such an important teaching. I wonder whether you've ever reflected on how much of the Dharma you have confidence in comes from your own embodied experience, and how much comes from books or talks of others. And so as a reflection question for this week, I offer you this question. What is the Dharma that you've seen with your own eyes? We just have 2 more talks on the Book of Eights, and then we'll conclude our exploration of this wonderful text. I do hope that you're enjoying and benefiting from these teachings. It's a delight to share them with you. We'll end with 3 sounds of the bell.